I had, it gave almost a immediate increase in energy, et cetera, but just it felt like too much, right? This is very subjective. And no aggression or anything like that, but it didn't feel good. And then so eventually what I discovered over the course of several months of trying, for instance, 0.3 mLs every third day, tried that. So take 2 days off, then take another 0.3 mLs, et cetera. Then move to that. What turned out to be best for me was I think that there ought to be some consideration of things between doing nothing. Obviously, there's doing nothing, there's behavioral optimization, lifestyle optimization, there's supplementation, and then there's, let's say, because it's the right way to do it, is, working with physician and prescription TRT. And obviously, there are a lot of people doing that nowadays. And so I've been forthcoming about the fact that I've done this experiment where starting January this year, in working with a physician, I started a simple regimen that most people, it's, the typical prescription is 0.7 mLs of 200 mg per mil testosterone cypionate. That's what they do in the States. Here, typically they have you do that once a week, or if your doctor is a little bit more aware, they say twice. They break it up into two. Meaning to take the total dose and divide it into two. Oftentimes they'll give you an anastrozole. So I'm telling you all these things that and that your listeners probably have already heard before. In my experience, it's very, very clear. It was clear to me immediately that dividing it in two was more rational. So that's how I started, 0.4 mLs. So that's going to be 80. That's equivalent to 80. If you want to talk milligrams, sometimes I think it's more useful to talk milligrams, because the typical output of the testicles is, I know that there's probably some disagreement with that, probably somewhere between 7 and 15 milligrams per day, or 7 and 20 milligrams per day. Is that
what I've seen in the literature is an average of 5 to 6 per day with a range of 3 to 10 is what I've seen personally.
Okay. So let's take let's land at 7 milligrams per day.
But oftentimes it's not really representative of that, because even if you injected 70 milligrams, once you cleave off the ester and count for like the molecular weight of the active hormone, like a lot of guys may end up feeling like shit on 70 milligrams, even though that's like high function for natural, balls. Right. But
yeah. So, and what's funny is I'd spent years in the laboratory injecting animals with various compounds and hormones and things. And so it was interesting. So and again, this was all done with a doctor legally, with supervision, et cetera. And so it was very interesting. I discovered something that won't be any surprise to you, which was that more is not better. That I did not feel good on that regimen. There's as you mentioned, some of the cardiac effects of testosterone, the negative cardiac effects are indirect because of increases in the sympathetic nervous system, right? Your autonomic nervous system, of course, as you know, has a sympathetic and a parasympathetic arm, parasympathetic being so-called rest and digest and just being calm, and sympathetic being really charged and elevated and adrenaline churning out. And it was clear that it gave almost a immediate increase in energy, et cetera, but just it felt like too much, right? This is very subjective. And no aggression or anything like that, but it didn't feel good. And then so eventually what I discovered over the course of several months of trying, for instance, 0.3 mLs every third day, tried that. So take 2 days off, then take another 0.3 mLs, et cetera. Then move to that. What turned out to be best for me was 0.5 mLs. So this is going to be 30 milligrams every other day.
50 milligrams every other day is what you said?
No. It's 30 because it's 200 mgs per mil.
30 milligrams. The audio cut out.
No, that's okay. So it ends up being 0.15 mLs of a 200 mg per mil concentration. So 30 mgs every other day. So you can add that to 15 milligrams per day.
Gotcha.
and that seemed to be right. Now, because I'm not a a competitive athlete. I'm truly doing this to research this, what will ultimately become a written thing. I'm monitoring everything by blood work, liver enzymes, etc., but not taking any anastrozole, because it's very clear to me, and this was discussed on my podcast with my colleague Robert Sapolsky, but it's very clear to me that estrogen is great for maintaining neuronal function, as you mentioned, eye health, memory, that's neuronal function, but soft tissue and connective tissue health. And it just, and I'm not suffering from any gyno or any kind of any major water retention. A few people have commented I'm a little puffier than I was at the turn of the year, but I'm willing to live with that. Now, the subjective effects, I think, are all the ones people have described before. You recover more quickly. Your energy, like for instance, it's here, it's 8:45 p.m. I had a full day, no nap. I got decent sleep last night, not great. I went back to sleep this morning for an hour after I woke up feeling I need a little more sleep. But yeah, you can drill right through the day. That's a very noticeable effect. And then when it's time to go to sleep, take my sleep supplements, drink my water, and go to sleep. And so a major subjective effect, and that's also objective, is that I used to feel pretty exhausted in the afternoon. I'd need an afternoon nap. Now it's optional, and so it's pretty remarkable. And it's something that the one thing that I think is very important that I think isn't discussed, but we talk about when I work with various communities, is that the importance of continuing to do cardiovascular work, and not just weight training. I think that you think about just weight training, eating, people getting apnea. You've talked about this on your podcast, cutting off circulation, sleeping a lot, eating a lot, lifting. I mean, you're I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. It's people are killing themselves that way. That's how you would kill an animal quickly. That's how you would shorten its life. There are other ways to, that if you really want to kill something quickly, you kill it. But which I don't recommend, but if you want to shorten the lifespan of anything, you overfeed it, you make it do hard work, you sort of create a rev in the engine, but you don't give it a place to put that. And I think that cardiovascular work, running 30, 40 minutes every other day or so, even if it's a jog, kind of zone 2 cardio, absolutely critical for keeping the blood lipids and overall sense of well-being in order. And I think for people who are not doing any hormone augmentation, that's also extremely important. And because especially if they're younger and they already have high levels of androgens.
Yeah. Some of the literature on just like a basic 10-minute walk after like postprandial, like the effect on nutrient partitioning and just like the tolerability to the spike in glucose and getting it back to homeostasis in a faster time frame, and just being more insulin sensitive. Like so many things are improved just by having like very like minor, like it's not like that cumbersome of basic exercise intertwined with your daily routine. It's definitely like massive. And people think just because I go to the gym and I hit it hard, then I'm like I've done my due diligence, and it's not necessarily the case at all. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that I love this phrase that you use about glucose disposal, because I have a colleague, his name is Sachin Panda down at the Salk Institute, and he's sort of one of the original people to formalize intermittent fasting, so-called time restricted.
I highly recommend his book, by the way. Very good.
The Circadian Code. He's really terrific. A really excellent scientist. And, your blood glucose level doesn't just go to zero immediately after you take your last bite. So rather than thinking about whether or not you're eating or not eating, it's better to think about, as whether or not your body is in a fed or fasted state, and how fed or how fasted. So if you just ate, it's pretty well fed, depending on what you ate, of course. If you're deep into your sleep and you've been asleep for 6 hours, you're far from a fed state. when you, that 30-minute walk after eating a meal acts as a glucose disposal agent. It reduces your circulating blood glucose pretty significantly, not as significantly as something like berberine or, these compounds that, which will do that dramatically, but metformin and things of that sort. But, I think that, making sure glucose isn't chronically high, making sure that getting cardiovascular exercise, it's night and day how much better people feel, how much better their blood lipid profiles are, their cardiovascular profiles of all kinds, and also their overall appearance. When somebody is just doing resistance training and they're on TRT and they're not doing any cardiovascular work, they look stressed. In fact, there's a telltale, I actually can spot it now. There's a left side vein that tends to kind of pop out when people are in this stressed mode. And this has to do with actually return of blood flow from the heart. It's actually, I've talked to some of my colleagues about this, and you can kind of spot when someone is in that chronic hypertension state. It's not a leanness thing. It's really, they're stressed. And, somebody who's 46 now, these are serious considerations, but they're serious considerations if you're in your 20s too, right? You seem to be a pretty relaxed Canadian, mellow,
You would think, man, but I'm like highly, like when you talked about being highly anticipating the next day and being excited to get the day started. Like me, I don't really have an off switch from work. So I often find myself like, just gearing to go constantly. So like I'm mellow in my
wait, let's be clear what we mean. You don't mean gearing to go constantly.
No. I mean like, not like, you know what I mean? Like, or actually maybe you don't know, but like I'm just constantly I don't know, like just ready to, I'm like very driven and very goal oriented and constantly like thinking about what I could be doing to optimize my time. And sometimes that's at the detriment of being able to live in the moment and actually be relaxed and get into like a parasympathetic state. So I can be somewhat like sympathetically dominant, like perpetually around the clock, to be honest. But I don't think that translates into my, like how I behave as much. You can't tell as much. Like I do seem pretty laid back and relaxed, but in my actual head, not as much as I should be, to be honest.
I like to think, different people have different temperaments. I had a bulldog. He was very large, but he could really activate, but most of the time he was pretty lazy. But so you've got a steed of Clydesdales in your head. That's good. That's a good way to be. I mean, I think that I've always had a lot of energy. I've always been, interested in learning as much as I can and doing a lot. I think that with each passing year, as the more I've emphasized sleep and regimen, the easier it's become to do things without feeling like there's, like things are coming apart at the seams. And I think that, but look, one of the beauties of something like graduate school or having a new business or something at a time when if you don't have a family, or even if you do, is that you can just lean full tilt into that. And that's a great thing, because there aren't as many people who need your time and attention. Have
you noticed a big difference on how driven you are on TRT versus off, like in terms of how goal oriented you are, your tolerance to stress? I don't know, like just like the way like you talk about the forward center of mass thing a lot, and kind of like your, I don't know, the I think there's definitely a huge component of endocrine profile of, like men versus women and how it affects their neurology and who becomes driven in like a business entrepreneurial aspect. I'm sure there is some sort of literature to like support that you've probably found. Sure. I don't know if there's something you could touch on that, and then how like the TRT has affected your mental state because I mean, you're becoming more and more entrepreneurial oriented, I'm assuming, throughout your exposure to the social media stuff. Has the TRT influenced like your, goal setting or anything, or what have you found?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think I when I was in graduate school, I was accused of being a OCD workaholic. Recently, I was also accused of being a OCD workaholic. I've always worked a lot. Okay. I've always worked a lot, and I enjoy work. I've always enjoyed work and working out. But also have great friendships and relationships. And, I wouldn't say that I've noticed a significant increase. I think there is one subjective effect which is that I do think that it tends to create a little bit more of a buffer, meaning when stressful events occur, I think my immediate reaction to it is more one of just kind of noticing and calm and paying attention and being able to lean in with more of a focus as opposed to feeling like I need to react in the moment. And so I think it's been so that's kind of counterintuitive, right? One would think, oh, it makes people really reactive. I think it's actually allowed for a little bit more equanimity in general. But when Robert Sapolsky, who wrote the book The Trouble with Testosterone and who's a luminary in the field of hormones and behavior, he worked for the great Bruce McEwen, who studied stress and hormones, and Robert is second to none in the stuff. When we talked about this, he said about hormones and their effects on psychology, he said, they tend to make people more of whatever they were before. And I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. Now, I do realize there are derivatives of testosterone, and you've talked about these on your podcast before, trenbolone and things like that can really activate aggression and have very robust psychological effects. Haven't gone anywhere near any of those, and I don't intend to. That's just too deep into the murky waters for someone like me who's health conscious and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that, to me, hormones are such a powerful lever on life and organisms and their bodies, their minds, and also the interactions between organisms. And then it's just an infinitely fascinating area of our biology. As you may have noticed, I've been doing some posts recently about how, there are good data of how people's sense of sweat from different people can impact notions of attractiveness. There's a whole literature on that. There's a whole literature on how the smell of women's sweat can cause testosterone increases in men. If women are taking oral contraception, then that effect tends to be blunted a little bit. This kind of thing. I mean, there's tons of literature in humans on this stuff, and hormones are powerful. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, you're well aware, but I think as people start to wade into the thinking about this, I just think these are major compounds of our health and well-being, but they also can be major compounds of our distress and sickness. So it's something to approach with a lot of caution.
The mention of like combined oral contraceptives and the effect that has, like, I've seen pretty significant detriment to total and free testosterone levels in women who are on them using synthetic progestins in concurrence with ethinyl estradiol as a like hyper aggressive estrogen receptor agonist to basically, castrate them, essentially, is what it's doing. That effect on their psychology and whatnot, and the effect it even has on like their preference of partners, it seems pretty glaring in the literature. What is, like, for me, I've always told, like, there's a lot of girls who use combined oral contraceptives still, and I've always told them